Super excited to have Mike Waters back on the Ostrom Avenue podcast. Mike, you're a veteran. Every time we have Brent Axe on, we kind of joke with him. He's the veteran. So are you. You know, you make so many stops here on the pod. So super happy to have you back on.
It's good to be back. It's good to be back here, right? Especially on the verge of basketball season.
Yep. You know, we know when Mike Waters is on, we know we're talking Syracuse men's basketball, of course. And, I think, you've covered this team for years now, but the way you've covered it's had to change, especially in the summertime. Usually it was just focusing on recruiting, but now it's a whole new element with the transfer portal. And, I'm keeping tabs on your X every time with these transfers and who Syracuse is interested in. And once again, it was another busy spring for this team and the portal.
Yeah, the years of having a season come to an end and
Yeah.
then getting a few weeks to kind of get your collective breath and maybe take a break, those are over, man. It's like as soon as the season's over, the portal opens. The portal opens when the tournament's still going on. And that's the start of a crazy month now. And it's an incredibly crucial time of the year, as we're learning, because what happens in that time, when the portal opens over those next few weeks, that's going to go a long, long way to dictating whether this next season is going to be a good one or a bad one.
Certainly is. And I think last year, maybe this team didn't execute the portal too well. Just general though, do you think they maybe did a little bit better job this year with Alex Klein now in the mix too? I certainly think they did. They got more ACC experience. Are you feeling the same way about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of things about their approach to the portal was different. You mentioned Alex Klein, who had been hired as the general manager a little over a year ago. It was his first season last year, but a year where he was spent preparing for the start of the transfer portal. I think Adrian Autry and his staff also learned a lot about the portal from the year before in terms of their approach and how they wanted to go about it. Because listen, this wasn't all just Alex Klein coming in and taking everything. He's taking direction from Adrian Autry. So I think they learned. And I also think they were financially a little bit more secure. I think they had some more dollars than they had the previous year. And I think that helped them after they identified the type of player they wanted and who they wanted, help them get those guys. You could go out and you could compete financially. Like the one great example is Nathan George, the point guard coming from Georgia Tech. He had a Final Three that included North Carolina and Oklahoma. So if you're in there and you're, recruiting against those schools, whether you offered more or similar or maybe just slightly less, but you got to the point where you were able to then recruit a kid on par with somebody else, maybe convince them that your opportunity was better, your playing style was better, your relationships with him was better, whatever it was. But they were able to go in there and get a Nathan George from Georgia Tech, a Nate Kings from an Oregon State, a William Kyle from UCLA. Obviously, much bigger pedigrees than the guys that they had the year before, who almost all of them, except for Eddie Lampkin, were from mid-majors.
It definitely seems like the quality of players has increased quite a bit. Going into year 3 of the Adrian Autry era, what do you think the identity of this team is going to be this season with a bunch of new faces, only JJ and Donnie coming back? Do you think it's going to be something similar to what we've seen the past 2 years? Or do you think it's going to be a whole new identity, a whole new theme under this new crew?
I think it's going to be what Adrian Autry has always wanted to do ever since he took over the job 2.5 years ago. But I think it's going to be maybe the first year where he has the type of personnel to execute it. He wants to go faster. He wants to be more aggressive defensively. He wants to play man to man. He wants to have guys playing belly button to belly button on defense. He wants bigs who can go away from the basket and help in that. He wants to be able to switch 1 through 5. And, his very first year, he won those 20 games, but he was doing it with a roster that was put together with Jim Boeheim's system in mind. And they did well, but I think we come to learn that a large part of the success that year is because you had a very extraordinary talent in Judah Mintz. You had a guy who you could say, put him out there on the floor, and he was a first, second, third team all ACC type of player and could win you some games. Last year, you didn't have that. Last year, They just didn't have the type of roster that could play the way Adrian really wants to play. Now, I think you're looking at some of these guys, they're athletic, especially the bigs. The bigs are just so different than Eddie Lampkin of last year. They're nothing like a Naheem McLeod, so none of those guys. William Kyle and Akir Soare are both 6'9", athletic, bouncy guys who are comfortable leaving the paint and defending a guy. They can hedge on screens. They can switch if needed. So I think just overall athleticism is going to be the biggest change that fans are going to see.
You mentioned those bigs, and that's something, I'm curious about. Do you think they have enough depth at that center spot? Because I'm a huge Donnie Freeman guy. I really think he has the potential to be a star player here. I just don't want to see him playing the center. I don't want him at the 5 spot. Do they have the depth so, we don't see that happen?
Not really sure yet. We haven't been into a practice yet.
I know.
It's hard to make a judgment. I mean, I think William Kyle is probably your odds-on favorite to be the starter at center. How good Akir Soare is or not, I mean, it's hard to just base it on his 15 to 17 minutes a game at Georgia Tech last year. I could see him filling in, behind William or in a platoon sort of situation. In terms of even more depth, the kid from Wisconsin or via Wisconsin from Mali and France, Sheffing Diawara, I did get a chance to see him in person for the first time recently. And, they weren't practicing yet, but they were moving around on the court. And he caught my eye. I mean, he's bigger than than the veteran centers, but he can move. He can move his feet. So it'll be interesting to see what he. In terms of Donnie Freeman at the 5, we might see that on occasion. I mean, he is taller than both Soare and William Kyle. They still have him listed at 6'9". I've been told he's 6'10", at least in his shoes. So yeah, I think Donnie has grown. If you wanted to play him there, I would say it all maybe depends on how well the other 2 centers are playing. If they're struggling, maybe you want to make a switch. And also might depend on who the other team has at the 5. You don't want to put Donnie Freeman in there against some low block throwback to the Armando Baycott day, something. You don't want him guarding that guy. I can't see him guarding Patrick Ngongba of Duke this year. But there might be another team out there that has, especially some of these non-conference teams, they might not have a really big. So rather than have somebody chase, although maybe you have some centers who are more capable of chasing, but you could put Donnie Freeman on a smaller center from one of the non-conference schools, and it would give him a chance to play alongside a Sadiq White. A very interesting looking front court could develop there. So yeah, I think they could experiment with it, but I wouldn't expect to see it ever for long spans.
How much is Donnie and JJ going to be relied on as leaders this season and to be not only on the court, but off the court? And do you expect the team kind of to run through those 2, maybe not with the ball, but the leadership and the style of play that Syracuse has on offense?
I guess the only 2 holdovers from a year ago, and both, returning with starting experience, and JJ's the oldest. JJ with the most experience in the program and being a senior overall, I think a lot of these kids are going to naturally look to him as something of the leader on the team. Donnie as well, just because he's going to be one of the more talented guys, and he is a holdover within the program. The interesting thing is when you look at leadership, well, William Kyle now, this is going to be his 4th year of college ball. 2 years at South Dakota State, 1 year at UCLA. He's older, he's got as many years of college ball as a JJ Starling, just not here at Syracuse. So how much does he need to be led? Nathan George has 2 years as a starter in the ACC. So he's, 1 year behind JJ, but ahead of everybody else in the roster in terms of ACC experience. I think sometimes it's really great when you have a really good leader, but sometimes it's also really great when you have a lineup that isn't totally reliant on a guy. That you got a bunch of guys, and some guys don't need to be led. They're okay. It's like William Kyle may not be the quote unquote leader of a team, but he's also perfectly fine on the floor. He's not like a baby-faced freshman who needs JJ's guidance here.
Certainly. And it's just weird, in college athletics now, anywhere you look, so many guys coming from so many different places that already have a ton of experience, just not at the place they're at right now. Peering over to those freshmen, you got two exciting ones, Sadiq White, Kyan Anthony. Adrian Autry, he never really seems to have a leash, at least last year on the young players. Maybe that was out of necessity. Do you expect these guys to kind of be right in the fold from the get-go?
Yeah, I think if he's playing the style he wants to play, Adrian Autry is going to need a bench. Guys are going to be going hard, which means they might need a break every now and again. It also might mean somebody's going to get a couple of reach-in fouls quickly. Okay, yeah. So you better have somebody able to come in. And I think Sadiq White, Kyan Anthony are both guys who could be, in that rotation. Soare is another one who will be in that rotation. You just keep going down the list. A guy who I think has been overlooked a lot this offseason, and I'm really intrigued by him, is Tyler Betsy. Another guy, 1 year at Cincinnati, so he comes to Syracuse. He's a sophomore, but he's a versatile player who could play both the 3 and the 4. Adds to that depth. He came out of high school, thought of as a really good 3-point shooter. He didn't shoot it great at Cincinnati, but from my discussions with Adrian Autry and some others around the program, they felt like the one thing he did get at Cincinnati was a crash course in defense. Cincinnati's teams, no matter who's the coach, they always seem to play great defense. I think Tyler Betsy learned to play college level defense last year. I think that's going to help him out after transferring to Syracuse this year. So, that's a lot of guys. We're starting to talk about guys. We haven't even mentioned like Luke Fennell and Aaron Womack, 2 other freshmen on the roster. So, yeah, I think you're going to see the depth utilized this year.
I think one of the players that I was really looking forward to watching is Betsy, and just the versatility there. Whether like if he can really find his shooting stroke at 6'8", 6'9", and he's seen that like he can handle the ball a little bit. I mean, he's going to be a weapon next to Donnie Freeman, because then you're going to have 2 guys that are 6'8" or taller that can really handle the ball and stretch the floor. With that size is really key. One of the other guys that Syracuse brought in, Nate Kings, we've heard the talk about him. You can shoot the lights out of the ball. And Syracuse last year really expected that from Chris Bell. Didn't happen. Is Syracuse going to get a guy that can knock down 3-pointers that when Chris Bell 2 years ago saw that, but before then, they've always had kind of that knockdown shooter. Is Syracuse going to have one with Nate Kings this year?
I think so. I mean, the numbers indicate that that's what he is. At Oregon State last year, he makes 44-point-something% of his 3-pointers. To put that in perspective, last year, Chris Bell shot 35%. So, Nate Kings, he rated up there nationally. I know Oregon State, since there was no Pac-12 anymore, they were a little bit off the radar for a lot of college basketball fans, especially those of us here in the eastern part of the country. But he had an offensive rating on KenPom.com of 25, number 25 in the country. That is really, really high for an offensive rating for a wing guard like that. He had a true shooting percentage that ranked 26th in the country. His true shooting percentage was 65%. And that's a percentage that Ken Pomeroy comes up with that incorporates, what would your 2-point shooting percentage be if you took your 2-pointers, your 3-pointers, and your free throws and put them all in there. To rank 26th in the country, again, for perspective, the highest ranked Syracuse player last year was Eddie Lampkin for true shooting percentage. He was at 136th. Now he's all in the low post. Eddie's not taking threes. So he's shooting that high percentage based on dunks and layups. We all saw Eddie's game. Nate Kings is doing it while shooting like over 100 threes. So, yeah, he can shoot. And the interesting thing, though, about Nate Kings, and I'm talking to folks at Oregon State after he had made his decision to transfer to Syracuse, was they recruited him 2 years ago thinking that he was going to be their best on-the-ball defender. And then he hurt his ACL and he didn't play that first year at Oregon State. He sat out. And then last year was sort of his get healthy year. So, yeah, he shot it great, but I think the Syracuse coaches aren't just recruiting a designated 3-point shooter guy. He's not just that. He can be a both ends of the court guy that, and again, I think it goes to the type of style that Adrian Autry wants this team to play. You can't just have a guy who can only shoot and can't defend anybody. So the fact that Nate Kings was viewed as a top of the line on ball defender by the Oregon State staff, I think is pretty encouraging to like the type of player you're hoping to see this year.
Last one on the players before we swing it over to the schedule. Nathaniel George, point guard, we mentioned him briefly from Georgia Tech. Is he the good person, the right guy, I should say, to have next to JJ Starling to really complement his game? He was someone when, the rumors came out about it. Me and Griffin were both really excited because it just seemed like the perfect piece for this team.
It'll be really interesting. On paper, that looks like a really pretty good backcourt. It really does. You got it. First of all, it's experienced at the ACC level at both positions. So that's great. The thing I look at that encourages me about Nathan George is not just his assists. He's a true point guard. He wants to pass the ball. He wants to run the offense. He led the ACC in assists last year. So you got that. But I think what can really help JJ is that last year he shot 34%, or Nathan George shot 34% from three. Last year's point guard was Jaquan Carlos. He didn't shoot it great from three, and he also didn't shoot it a lot. When Nathan George shoots 34% from three last year, he did so while taking 170-something shots from three-point range. That is a lot. That's more than any Syracuse player attempted last year. So not only can he shoot it pretty well in terms of his percentage, but he will shoot it. He can get it off, and I think that'll help space the floor. So if you're talking about a Nathan George who can hopefully shoot even better, maybe take some fewer threes, maybe not as many bad ones, because hopefully he's on a better team. But if he can shoot 35% from three at the point, and Nate Kings is a 40-something% shooter on one wing, and now you bring back Donnie Freeman. Now the court's starting to open up for JJ. We all know JJ the past couple of years has struggled from three, but what he doesn't struggle from is getting to the lane, getting to the basket. If this guy gets single coverage and an opening, there's not too many people in the league who can stop him. And I think these are the pieces, and add like, so maybe a Tyler Betsy goes in who can still shoot the three. The court is still spaced out. Another element that I know we're moving away from the Nate George, JJ Starling backcourt, but just still talking about JJ, another element that I could see really helping JJ is William Kyle. I know he's not a great, scorer. We don't think of him in terms of offense right now. But Eddie Lampkin last year could score, but he couldn't help JJ. If Eddie came way out to set a screen, his man didn't have to come with him. Eddie wasn't a threat. William Kyle, if he comes out, well, that's an athletic looking guy. And now maybe you have to come out. And also if he comes out, William Kyle's going to go from that screen to the basket a lot faster than Eddie. There's going to be a high pick and roll. And with a 44-inch vertical leap, JJ all he has to do is throw it in the air and let William Kyle go get it. Just pretend he's Justin Jefferson or Amon-Ra, throw it near the rim and let him go get it. I think all that helps JJ. The other thing, too, is as an athletic guy, you can move him around the floor. And if teams are still, we'll go back to your dread of Donnie Freeman in the five. If teams still want to try to clog the lane on Syracuse's centers, put Donnie Freeman at the five.
Yeah.
Well, they better go guard him in the corner. And now, again, just you space the floor for, the guy. I could see JJ's scoring per game go down, but his shooting percentages and his assists per game both go up.
Now, to look at that dreaded schedule that came out yesterday, I mean, the first thing I noticed was all those 9 p.m. starts, which
Me too.
I know it's just ridiculous. And my first initial reaction was, did the ACC and ESPN go to Syracuse and say, hey, you can start at 9 p.m. and be on linear TV, or you can go play the Monmouths and the St. Joseph's on ACC Network Extra and have a normal time. But if you want to be on linear TV, ACC Network, then you go play at 9 p.m. And Syracuse, with the new revenue thing where you get paid for the amount of clicks and the amount of views, said, okay, like, that's the thing. You're now playing at 9 p.m. to get that extra money. But do you think the 9 p.m. games is going to affect the atmosphere in the dome and how big of a deal that is going to be?
I think part of the reason for the 4 9 o'clock games on the ACC schedule is just when you have an 18 team league and you have these, the TV partners between the ESPN networks and the ACC network as part of that, that this is just the way the cookie crumbles. I have not had a chance to go through the entire schedule and see like how many other 9 o'clock weeknight games other folks have. But I think part of it's just the man 18 teams is just brutal to try to schedule. It does, I think, affect attendance at the Dome. Syracuse is a working class city. People have to work the next day. Kids have school the next day. It's hard, and I know it happens in other areas too. But I think it's particularly true of the Syracuse area compared to other ACC places, and because of the size of the Dome, a crowd that is 3,000 down. Like a 7 o'clock crowd would get 20,000 in there, but a 9 o'clock crowd's going to get 17. But the difference is so dramatic in a building the size of the Dome. And yeah, so it's not great. Funny thing is, though, just in terms of TV, the 9 o'clock is considered prime time, right? 7 o'clock is before prime time, or maybe the second half hits what we would normally call prime time. So in a way, you're getting prime time TV slots, but it's not so great when you're asking people on a cold, snowy night to go and to a game in the dark, well after dark, 9 o'clock, and you're not going to get home till about 11:30 probably. And yeah, it's hard, but I just think it's part and parcel. You do make an interesting point though about this whole revenue share, and part of it's going to be predicated on TV ratings of all things. So in a way, maybe this is good. Maybe Syracuse officials were like, well, we'll take a couple 9 o'clock slots. It might hurt our attendance, but we should get pretty good TV ratings for some of those games.
Yeah, certainly interesting, but for us, journalists and those working at the game, that makes those nights a little bit later, which I'm not looking forward to. I don't like getting out of the Dome around midnight. In terms of the rest of the schedule, looking non-conference wise, the big tournament is that Players Era Championship in Las Vegas. Every year Syracuse has the big non-conference tournament, whether it's on a tropical island somewhere, or it's in Vegas or something like that. The last few years it hasn't gone well for them. They've bad defeats. Houston, Kansas, top teams. But it's just so. Or I remember last year they went to New York City, Madison Square Garden. That didn't go particularly well either. I just think it's so early in the year to play these tough teams. I'm kind of worried it will be another uphill battle for the Orange.
Oh, that is a heck of an uphill battle in terms of as long as the hill is Mount Everest that you're talking about. I mean, Houston and Kansas back to back.
Yeah.
That is a tough ask. I think it's not only a challenging schedule, I think it's a schedule that puts a lot of pressure on those 3 games in Vegas, and then the very first one after it coming back
Tennessee,
to the Dome to play Tennessee. Those 4 games in a row, because let's face it, the rest of the non-conference schedule, you're not going to get a lot of credit, even if they run the table on the rest of the schedule. I mean, we'll see maybe there's a team that breaks through in the mid-major level. Maybe St. Joseph's is decent. Maybe Hofstra's decent, but you do have one road game to Drexel. But if they go undefeated against the rest of the non-conference schedule, but then lose those 4 games, 3 in Vegas and Tennessee, they're going to be hard pressed to get an NCAA bid, because you can't rely on the ACC anymore to lift you in, because the ACC's been underperforming. And I know the ACC's taking steps and they think they're going to be better and everything, but how many net top 30, upper echelon games are you going to have at home in the ACC? Duke's not coming here. Louisville's not coming. So you have to play both of those away. It makes it really tough. I think they have to beat Tennessee at home, and I think they got to get 1 game in Vegas.
Yeah,
those are definitely some tall asks for Syracuse, and I think the overall thing with this non-conference roster is it's you can't afford to slip up. These are teams that Syracuse, maybe outside of the past 4 years, would handle by 30 plus points. But when you go to double overtime against Youngstown State last season, it makes you think a couple things. And I know this is a new year. Talk about bigger picture season. Is this a team that can finally get back to the big dance and save Adrian Autry's potential job if the season goes well?
I think it's going to be a much better team than last year. I really don't think that's a question. I think they're better. I don't think they necessarily have to get back to the tournament in order to save Adrian Autry's job. I think they have to show improvement, significant improvement. Some of that NCAA tournament stuff, like let's say they do win one game in Vegas, and maybe they do beat Tennessee. It still doesn't mean you're in the tournament. It just means that you're going to enter the ACC portion of the schedule still, irrelevant in terms of a bid. They still got work to do. But what if they win 20 or 21 games? They could go 21-10 and not get a bid. It's tougher to get a bid these days. There's a lot of good teams out there. There's a lot of other teams like Syracuse who think they're going to be better and get a win get a bid this year. So I just think if we just see significant improvement from the year before, and now we start to get an idea of like, okay, maybe it took him an extra year or two, but he's finally got the program going the way he wants it to go. He's got his staff in place. They have a better idea of the players they want to get. You have a little bit more confidence in him. And plus, even after this coming season, he's going to have 2 more years left on his deal. Are you really going to let go a guy who could conceivably have 2 20-win seasons in his first 3 years?
Yeah.
Yes, I know fans are hankering to get back to the tournament. They're starving to get back there. And of course, Syracuse, that's where they should be historically. Syracuse is a NCAA tournament regular. But when you're working hard to get back there, and let's face it too, even though they did have more NIL money this year, they're still not in the top 5 or 6 in the ACC. There's still a lot of programs out there that have a lot more money. So you're asking them to punch up.
Certainly. And I'm a senior this year at Syracuse. The class last year was the first one in a long time that never saw that tournament basketball. And that was something that they didn't like that when they threw their caps in the air. For me, it would be great to see this team, go back dancing, or maybe just even when I look at the ACC tournament, even just have a top seed in that, be better positioned to be more successful in the ACC tournament to, maybe, create some of that NC State kind of magic that we saw 2 years ago. Just last one for you. I know you talked about big picture season overall, but, when we talk to you maybe in March or something, do you think this will be maybe Autry's best season, or just, is it a firm thing to say that this roster is better than last year's?
I'm very confident saying the roster is better than a year ago. I think this team does have the chance to be the best team he's had. Even the team that first year, even though they won 20 games, it never seemed like we were talking about them being on the bubble. We knew they were just kind of bumping along. When they lost in the ACC tournament that year, we knew their fate was sealed. It was over. I think this year could at least be different. Whether they do or don't make it into the tournament, I think they got a chance. They got a chance to be more, relevant on a national scale, relevant in terms of being mentioned in terms of an NCAA bid. But I tell you what, it is a really scary proposition, though, as we've talked about, that your season could come down to games 5 through 8 on the schedule. Yeah. They get the 4 early games, and then it's going to be Vegas and Tennessee. And man, that is going to be just such an important week for the entire year. You're really putting a lot of eggs in one basket. This is really the year they should be playing last year's schedule.
Yeah.
With a couple games in Brooklyn, go, Texas Tech, come back, play at Georgetown, maybe somebody else, go back down to New York, play Maryland again. I think if this year's team had last year's schedule, they're in the tournament. No doubt. Yeah. But I think they've actually made it tougher on themselves the way they appeared to have adjusted the schedule with all the teams that are in the, outside the 300 of the RPI, and then just these other teams that are at the upper echelon.
Yeah, and well, that Vegas tournament I think has a good check at the end of it. I think that maybe was definitely a reason to perhaps go out there. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time. You're the guy for Syracuse men's basketball. We'll keep you always locked in all your articles and everything. And I hope you have a great season covering this team.
Just always good talking to you guys. Thanks again for having me on, and you have a good season too.
Awesome. Thank you so much.